everyone. Greetings to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are today. Today's webinar, we are going to be focusing on Scream for Scrum or Scream at Scrum, what's going on. It's an approach that I basically created where people are asking for, I want to go with Scrum, and then they adapted Scrum, and then they scream at Scrum. So what are the things that are actually making this happen? Why do we want to go for Scrum, as well as why Scrum is not working? So that's an approach that I took here. This is going to be part of our journey into Inflectra with Agile series. So for those of you that know me already, I am Sriram Rajgopalan. For those of you that are just new to this webinar, I am Sriram Rajgopalan, working as an enterprise Agile evangelist. I have a doctoral degree in organizational leadership through project management, MBA degree in management, master's in computer engineering, and a bachelorate in electronics and communication. I also started my career as a software engineer, moved along in the career food chain as a team leader, business analyst, project manager, scrum master, agile coach, and I also managed a number of teams in a director and vice president capacity. Number of different certifications to my credentials. They include portfolio management, program management, project management, Scrum, schedule management, Agile, different flavors of coaching, Six Sigma, Black Belt, and all those things. And recently I published a book called Organized Common Sense. It's available on Amazon. It's talking about how project management principles apply to everyone, both project management and Agile related concepts. I also have a lot of facilitation experience in a number of different countries, US, India, UK, Canada, Switzerland, Brazil, and Vietnam. That's in a nutshell about me. Today's webinar, as I mentioned, is part of the 4-part series, and we are having the 3rd webinar at this point. Each webinar is approximately an hour long, and we will reserve time at the end for questions as usual. Sometimes the webinars may introduce the concept using a tool. I'm not planning to use any tool at this particular point. I want to be a little bit tool agnostic. The 4 webinars that we had lined up were about top 5 techniques to manage programs and portfolios. We covered that on February 7th. And then metrics in the brand new world of programs and portfolios. We covered that on February 18th. And then we are focusing right now on Scream for Scrum or Scream at Scrum, what's going on. And there's one more seminar that's going to come up on March 10th. It's focusing on setting up a PMO, even with all the growth in Agile. So getting back to the seminar, so it's going to be Scrum. The focus is not on all of Agile approaches. Agile includes a number of different things. Agile is a superset. Scrum is just one part of Agile. But the most important thing that Scrum inherits also from Agile, it's all about the collective team commitment. And yes, it was formed during a rugby ceremony or a rugby game, but at the end of the day, Scrum is primarily focused on how the team makes collective commitment and honors the collective commitment. And when that doesn't happen, things start falling out. So when we are talking for Scrum, it's primarily the collective team commitment that actually brings everyone closer together. Now, how are the things that are going to manifest here? So when we are looking at Scrum in a superset, we definitely have to see what is the Agile Manifesto. Okay, so the Agile Manifesto has 4 important value ordered pairs. So they say, what is valued more versus the valued less. So one of the first things that they mention is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. The next one is working software versus comprehensive documentation. Please bear in mind that Agile was primarily Agile Manifesto was primarily written by a number of different people that were contributing primarily in the information technology space. So that's one of the reasons working software becomes one of the valued more aspect of it is. And then we talk about customer collaboration over contract negotiation and embracing change over following the plan. Seems very simple and easy to understand, but what has happened is this information has been lost in translations. What we are telling over here is that we want more of valued more section. We are not saying we don't want everything that's listed in the valued less. We don't want to come back and say we don't not going to do anything relating to contracts because we are agile. Even when you are actually having a sprint or an iteration, we have a sprint planning that is happening, which is the one that is basically moving forward with following the plan. There needs to be just enough documentation based upon the industry that you are developing this particular product for. Similarly, processes are the means by which we get to the end, and the tools are, enabling that process. And so we need to have processes and tools. We're not going to, throw away everything. Even within an agile context, you have those 4 important ceremonies, right? We're not going to ignore those things. So what has happened is this is grossly misunderstood at this particular point, and the focus seems to be, let's deliver something in the next 2 weeks. Rather than focusing on proper quality. Quality is always by design. It's not an accident. And so we are forgetting the fact that we are focusing on quality along with delivery. Instead, we are trying to ship something in the name of, let's gather some quick feedback from the customers and things like that. And it comes from 2 important elements, the people that contribute and then the processes that they follow. People come and ask me, Sriram, why did you not consider organizations in the context? The reason why I did not consider organizations in the context is organization is the byproduct of the process that people follow, right? So if you are able to actually keep the focus to people and process, and if we keep it simple, we are able to actually understand a little bit more about, why organizations follow certain things as a result of the processes that people have put in place. So based upon some of my understanding, some of my talks and experiences in a number of different places, I have done a cost analysis, a root cause analysis. That's the reason why I'm having this fishbone kind of an approach over here. And these points that I'm going to mention are not necessarily tied to any country, but it's just bringing the global perspective in place over here, right? And so when you look at this, the first thing is the leadership loss. The commitment from the leadership team is very important, and their focus seems to be more on the profit than actually protecting the core assets, which are the contributions that are coming from employees, the product that we are developing, and all those things. That needs to be the main focus. So instead of focusing on the profit alone, if we start protecting the core assets, then we are really making a lot more important sense. And these things are also emanating from a number of different philosophies that have come from even Jim Collins when he talked about build to last. Those things truly come up over there as well. The next one is the team maturity or immaturity. If the tree has not transformed from a me mentality to a we mentality, then the team commitment is absent. Only then we will be able to move forward to the next level where the team commitment actually comes up, right? And so if the team is not mature enough to adapt Scrum, then we are not necessarily going to see the success that Scrum promises, correct? The third one is going to be process myopia. Everything will be short-circuited, or we will not do certain things because we are actually going back to our individuals' interactions rather than processes and tools. And we are going to solve everything in the next iteration, don't worry about it, and we'll move forward with the next step. And that's how we are trying to move forward rather than truly understand how the process is supposed to enable us for success. And so we are becoming more short-sighted in our approach in understanding process because we don't want to have any process at all. Correctly. And then the next one is going to be the tool bias, preferences of people over certain tools, inhibiting how the tool space have grown, and we are limiting continuous improvement that needs to happen in place. So these are the 4 different major contributions that are actually making any agile as well as Scrum not necessarily succeed. And I'm talking about Scrum because Scrum is one of the predominant agile flavors that is currently in place at this point. So I'm going to bring these 4 concepts back to a construct over here, and I call them like the leadership, the process myopia, and then the process and the tools and all those things that we talked about, the team maturity and all those things. So that's why you see these things. But at a very high level, I have them color coded in certain fashion, right? The red is for Scream for, the actual team comes and says we want this, right? And so when you look at this, leadership loss and process myopia are coming into that thing, and those two things contribute to Scrum 4. And then the next one is going to be when people are screaming at Scrum because things are not working. That's primarily coming from team maturity and team bias, tool bias. Okay, so those are the 4 important elements. So I'm forming this construct so that I'm able to move forward into the next stages at this point. So let's start talking about each and every one of them. They are all tightly interrelated. They're not going to be completely siloed as well. Okay, so when you're talking about leadership, we are focusing more about, let's get something to the market fast. So, the speed to market, in their rush to that delivery, people misunderstand the framework and all the different supporting processes that needs to be in place. So inadequate understanding. In the example diagram that I'm showing over here, the person from the East Africa is actually trying to shake hands because he's shaking hands with somebody from the West. But whereas from the person from the West is actually trying to nod because this person is actually working with somebody from East Asia. So when you look at this, that's the misunderstanding, and that kind of a misunderstanding about the process and about the framework is actually going to cause leadership failure, right? And let's see how that will actually manifest itself. So based upon my own understanding of research about these spaces, I have come down with 6 different persona, if I want to call them that way, of agile related leadership failure. Okay, and those are this. The first one is going to be on the resistant side. These are members that are having Gen X or kind of a person. That person has a generational gap problem, and he or she is not able to actually relate to some of the creativity that comes from the millennial generation. As a result, these people are much more leading themselves into task orientation rather than bring new ideas to the market to the kind of table. So the approach is, it's already working for me, so I don't need to see any change at this point. That seems to be the theme behind the resistance. So they are not embracing it. The next one is going to be the never heard of agile kind of an approach. The executives that fall into this category are open to ideas but are unfamiliar about the framework. And their lack of familiarity, as well as their unwillingness to try new ways, because if they fail, they are going to have additional challenges that they have to face, and all those things that actually causes them to not have a proper initiative in terms of understanding how to move forward with the new trends. And that's another problem that we want to see addressed. The next one is going to be big vision. And these are executives that have a grandiose vision. We want to see the change. We want to move forward with a new way of doing things and all those things. So these groups of executives understand that the current structure is not in line with the vision that they have for the major growth. However, they recognize the need to develop products differently for competitive positioning. However, they are actually depending upon the middle management to tell how to do it. So they create some SWAT teams or small sub teams and all those things, and they give it to these people. And these members are not necessarily understanding the alignment to the strategy, or do not relate everything, and everything is having a short time frame where they have to deliver, and their big vision is not getting actually translated. In fact, the middle management has not even bought into the big vision, right? And those are the patterns that we want to also see addressed. Then there is this fourth group that I call misinformed, either from their previous experience or in a different conference or something like that. They hear somebody saying like, oh, I tried this and it didn't work. But they don't understand the full context. They don't do the fact checking as to what contributed to these problems and what assumptions were made and all those things. Instead, they succumb to the halo effect. Well, if somebody tried this and it didn't work for them, most likely it's not going to work for me too, so let me not try it. And so that's another group that we want to see properly getting addressed. And then the fifth group is much more about metric orientation. Everything is all about numbers, because they go into this fallacy that numbers don't lie. Well, numbers can be used to tell a lie. There is a very big statement that basically says like there are two types of lies. One is going to be actual lies, and the other one is going to be statistics. right? And so we can use numbers to project what we want to say. As a result, the focus on metric alone is not necessarily going to be good, right? And then the next one is going to be the insufficient experience. And so we don't have enough experience, so we are going to bring some external consultants and leave everything to them. But these consultants don't understand our core operating business. As a result, they don't understand the competitive positioning, why we do things certain way, and all those things. Instead, we are actually seeing all problems to be solved by the same solutions that the consultants have tried and worked. So these are some of the leadership related failures that contribute to, we want to move forward, but then we don't set the processes in place correctly to move forward. So let's see how it will manifest over here. Then these people come back and say, we want to go for Scrum, but they don't do certain things. First of all, they don't have a dedicated product owner. This may be because we don't want to have too much full-time employee expenses, or we can spare this person is just shared the resource, or anything like that, right? And then the next one is going to be principles of coaching is misunderstood. Anybody becomes a project man or a Scrum Master. Scrum Master has a certain specific notion behind coaching. But we take a QA team member and put them as a Scrum Master or a project manager to Scrum Master and all those things. I'm not saying these things are good or bad. All I'm saying is, the coaching, the principles behind, the tenets behind coaching has to be understood, because a coach is primarily going to come back and ask more powerful questions and let the other person think through the solution rather than actually give a solution, right? As a result of these two things not properly in place, what happens is the team sprints. We have iterations, we are trying to do certain things, but we don't understand how all these things are mapping to our strategy. 10 sprints have been completed, but how does this 10 sprints map to the actual business strategy that we heard in the town hall? We are not able to relate to that at all. So this is where we are coming up with all these Scrum but approaches which are not necessarily working, right? And that's one way of manifestation as to why Scrum starts failing, right? You scream for it, but you don't actually implement right. So how do you address them? So a few approaches that I have come down with is get senior management to commit to Agile. When you say, I want to move forward with this approach, it's a different way of thinking. It's a different approach to, getting things done. So you have to start looking at it from that aspect rather than using one of your, personas to say, this is how I have seen it happen and this is how I want to see it happen, right? Then it's not going to necessarily work. Embrace agility as a culture. The entire organization should actually embrace agility. If the development team is actually embracing agility, but the QA team does not want to follow any of those things, then we are not going to be really agile. In other words, if a developer comes and asks our testers to think like, okay, what are some of the test cases that we really have to start thinking? And if the tester says, well, I don't know, you tell me, what the requirements are, and you push it to me, and I will then immediately start testing. Well, that's going to be a much more tactical approach, right? That is not going to necessarily make Agile or Scrum succeed. The third thing is going to be continuous learning mindset. We do come back and put the fear factor in front of people, especially at the leadership level, and we say, if this doesn't work, so and so is going to be the impact. We are going to lose so much money and all those things, which is something that you need to say, but you need to actually deliver them in a specific way so that the team has an option to innovate and try something new and all those things, right? So we need to promote that continuous learning mindset, just the principles behind the Shuhari and the Kaizen and all those things that we have talked about. Now, if customers are important and the product that we are going to serve, develop, is going to really serve their needs, and get a dedicated product owner. We need to move away from this is a shared person, we can't afford them, or we don't have budget for this particular role and all those things. It's not going to be really helpful at all if the product owner is not a dedicated person. Right. Then similarly, if the employees are really important, make sure that you get a dedicated coach, whether it is an enterprise level coach or a team level coach, or you train the people to become coaches in their capacity. Try to actually spend some time and energy on that particular one. Otherwise, you are not going to actually get the coaching mindset within the team and for the team. And finally, enhance transparency to the product backlog. Product backlog is not something that needs to be locked down to one particular team alone. It needs to be visible to other things. So success breeds success. In order for other people to embrace Scrum and your approaches, they have to see how you are enabling it and how you are succeeding in that particular approach. Success breeds success, again, as I mentioned. And so make sure that it is much more visible, so that everybody is able to come back and provide feedback and also emulate your success patterns. Okay, that's one thing. And the next one is going to be process. So I'm focusing on the Scrum 4 at this point. So I'm not going into cyclical faction. So I'm moving into the P, the process approach over here. So when you are looking at the process, we are trying to make sure that we are iterating. That is what Scrum is talking about, right? Like 2 to 4 week iterations, preferably in the 2 weeks time frame. We are focusing on let's iterate using the concepts of time boxing. But time box iteration goals should not take the focus away from the benefit recognition that we need to have incrementally, right? Incremental and iterative has to go together. Oftentimes we are saying at the end of every iteration, we need to be able to push the product increment to the production environment, to the customers. But if you're not doing that because of our approaches to release planning and all those things, we need to make sure that we are looking at the benefits. In other words, how the work that I'm doing in every iteration with a specific goal is tied to the release goal, and how it is tied to the product roadmap, and how we are actually focusing on the consolidated benefits, the recurrent benefits, and the incremental benefits. We need to make sure that we are tying all those things. If not, we actually become fragile. That's the reason why I picked up this particular picture, because if you don't follow this process, Agile becomes fragile. Now Scrum also fails in that particular aspect as well. So it's very important for us to not only iterate with the time boxing principle, but we should also not take the focus away from benefit recognition. We talked about the benefits and different types of benefits in our program model already, program and portfolio. So Scrum values are the foundational principles behind how the process should be in place. So Scrum values serve as the process base here. And there are 5 important Scrum values, and they are courage, focus, openness, respect, and commitment. These are the 5 important Scrum values, and these things should manifest appropriately. And if you don't actually enable these behaviors within your Scrum process with all the 4 ceremonies and all those things, including the backlog grooming, sprint planning, daily stand-up, reviews, and retrospective, if you don't do those things, you are going to have some problems. So, Scrum values is the foundation behind how you are influencing behaviors, right? You need to be able to influence behaviors, and that's one of the leadership elements. Right. The next one is going to be process should also be reviewed for improvement. The existing process that you probably have put in place is also a candidate for improvement. That's not like one time set done, because processes needs to be continuously reviewed so that they are not overburdening or over resource imbalances getting created as a result of that. You need to address those things. Process is also not just about Scrum, but it's also about the context in which Scrum operates, which is the organizational context. That's the reason why I was basically telling organization is the byproduct of the process that people create, right? And so we have to look at all these different things as to how we are enabling this. And if you are doing this properly, then others will see how it is working and will adjust their behaviors and their terms and all those things, and then will come and embrace agility much more, right? But let's focus on how processes are actually set up, most of the time, right? So the ceremonies, we focus on all the 4 important ceremonies, but we don't focus on how the outcomes from each and every one of those ceremonies are integrated to the strategy and benefits. So the backlog is not seated with enough value-added stories. And in previous webinars, I have talked about customer value-add, business value-add, technical value-add, and process value-add stories that we need to actually look at. And if you're not actually looking at those kind of stories and how it is actually tied to the major features that we are trying to release and how it is all tied to the actual benefits that we are going to recognize, then the alignment is missing. The alignment of the entire teams to the strategy is missing, and that's an important role of the product owner. And if the product owner is spread thin or focusing on a number of other things. It's the role of a Scrum Master to focus on that behavior with both the team as well as the product owner. And so integration to strategy and benefits is extremely critical. And that's one of the reasons why if you take somebody who is a team leader and position them as a Scrum Master, you are not setting them up for success. As a result, they don't set your product for success as well. And so we need to not just focus on the Agile ceremony, but we should also not take our focus away from strategy and benefit alignment. Similarly, we focus on the artifacts. When we are focusing on the artifacts, we immediately say we are going to use, this particular tool versus that particular tool, and we will create this, the impediment registers. Whether we are using a specific tool or whether we are using Excel to record it or whatever it is, we are basically focusing on, what are the tools that we are going to use to create the backlog and, track the issues and the tasks and all those things. But the Scrum is going to create a product that is going to live in the product ecosystem or within the organizational ecosystem. And you have to collaborate with stakeholders that are outside of the Scrum too. So there needs to be the legal, the compliance team, the other members of the procurement team, all those members have to be the HR team, all those things members have to be sometimes consulted. But when that consultation is not there, you create a Scrum product or you create a product increment and you push it and it's not internally adopted. As a result, it comes back. And this is an indication of the lack of collaboration that's happening right from the product backlog grooming. Right. And as we are moving forward into the whole, sprint planning and everything else. And so that should be something that we need to consider. Other people should be able to review and collaborate and provide feedback and all those things. And that's all the more reason why transparency to the product backlog is extremely important. Right. The next one is going to be performance. And when we are doing the retrospective, we are trying to, find out all the games that we can play to see what worked, what didn't work, and all those things, or what should we continue doing, stop doing, and all those things. But at the end of the day, how is the outcome we are going to generate actually tied to the strategy, the benefits? If we are not able to actually make a sale, if you are not able to actually get a customer to adopt these things, then what are we developing these things for? Right? Alignment to benefits. Benefits are tied to the product strategy. Product strategy should be tied to the actual company strategy. And so all those things needs to be aligned properly. If that alignment is not there, we have out of focus. And when we have no focus, we are sprinting, but we are not necessarily delivering the benefits that are translated into value. Right? So the process should actually become the glue between the strategy and the team cohesion, how the team comes together as a result of how they understand the product strategy and then figure out the processes. So the processes should actually make sure that they are bridging the thing. But if the process is much more about I'm creating a backlog in Jira, or I'm creating a document in Confluence, or I'm putting something in a Microsoft project or in Spira team, or that alone is not going to take care of everything else. It needs to actually bring everything together in terms of how the strategy and team are working together, right? So what are some of those things that we can do to address this, right? First of all, avoid the we know what to build syndrome, right? The major problem with the Scrum team is, they become like a small group, and as a result, they don't go talk to other people, or the product owner is not in charge with the responsibility of going and gathering all this information, and everything becomes a small team. Yes, they need to actually do the daily sprint, and they need to have dedicated focus and all those things. But at the end of the day, the product that you are developing is not just for the team, it's for somebody else. And we need to basically gather more information from the voice of customer, voice of business, and all those things, so that we are actually having a good house of quality. So we need to avoid this we know what to build syndrome and gather more information. The next one is promote product discovery. Sometimes we have to realize that there is something called serendipity. Sometimes we have to do a few things, and as a result of that, we will find some new features. And so set aside some time for at least some members of your team to do some product discovery. What if I do this? What if I, those what if scenarios have to be part of your innovation mindset as to how I do a few things differently so that I'm able to, come up with better approaches of solving people's problem, right? Then make sure that you're investing in a coach. Even if you have a coaching background, make sure that you are having a different person come and coach, whether in the form of coaching or in the form of facilitation or in the form of training and the form of continuous learning, whatever it is. Make sure that you are having some additional time for coaching, because it's at the end of the day, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So we need to actually make sure that the Scrum team is actually understanding the importance of coach. And finally, promote self-organization. The team has to become accountable together. It's not like the cubicle mentality of, tell me what I should do kind of an approach. So we have to actually let people form, storm, norm, and then perform, right? We need to actually start them to, do that self-organization pretty fast, right? That's the most important thing. Now that I talked about how the team should be, let's take a look at some of the elements of the team themselves. A long time back, I was taking a vacation in Hawaii, and I went down the actual, one of the submarines, and I heard somebody basically at that particular point say, all the fishes, small fishes, they form in certain formation so that they look like a very big fish in the eyes of their predator. And I took a snapshot of that particular point, which didn't come through fine, but this is a particular snapshot that basically tells me that, self-promote the self-organization at this point. If the team is not going to form that self-organization, what happens is the team expects somebody else to problem solve, right? Scrum succeeds only when the team is self-organized, focused on how to solve the problem. Right. So let's take a look at how these things will, manifest. So the first important thing that we have to realize is that, individuals have to realize how dependent they are on other people. So the more independent thinking that you have, the more you are actually in the me mentality. And then we are moving into, I need something else from you. And then we all need something from each other. Mentality. So that's the interdependency, right? So when you look at this, when you have that independent mentality, we are still individuals. And then we become dependent because, people form some, cohesive groups, which means like, QA group, developer group, business analyst group, project management group, service delivery group, help desk group. So we are forming some group association, affiliations, and all those things. But all of us should come together as a team. Only when we are all going to be as a team, the net product is going to be fruitful or successful. So when you are looking at this the Elmo talks about what's important for Elmo. That's why I started using this picture. So you need me to succeed. Yes, each one of us should actually contribute in some shape or form, but the management should not be exception. We need to come together as a group, right? When we look at that, when we transition from the individuals to the group, we are into the we. All the bugs have to work together to make sure that they are able to collect enough food for their winter, right? So we are becoming we need each other to succeed. It's not like how many granules each and every one of us are going to collect. It's going to be how much we all need, that we all have to support each other. And that's more about some of this transformational leadership mindset, the individual interactions, consideration, stimulation, motivation, and all those things that we need to have, right? And once we have that, we need to move into the next section that's going to be the us, right? Where it's, at some point, if this product is going to exist, some point the product is not going to exist. We have to look at it from the life cycle of the product, and then, to move forward. That's what the Lion King message was actually trying to reinforce. And community made us successful. If the extra large community, the other legal team, the compliance team, the procurement team, the audit team, the management team, if all those other members are not available, our product is not going to be successful. We may deliver the greatest product conformance to requirements is met, but fitness for purpose is not met because it's a delayed product and all those things. So community made us successful, and that's where the servant leadership actually comes in. So we need to realize this particular approach, and this is all the more reason why I'm saying coaching is extremely important, because no Scrum Master that comes just from a QA team or a development team or a project management team is going to actually meet these requirements effectively as much as they should, right? So when these things are not understood, what happens is the team completes a sprint, right? The 2-week iteration or 4-week iteration or 3-week iteration, whatever it is, we finished the sprint, but what happens is they are always asking for, you tell me what I should do, I will do it. Well, then self-organization is not there. It's, I'm telling you, this is what we need to accomplish. This is my end goal. So you tell me how I should do it, right? Instead, if the team comes back and has this, you tell me what I should do, then we are really missing out on the stakeholder engagement and risk management, because we will start telling like, okay, in my mind, I think this is what you should do, but we are not the one who's doing it. They are the one who's going to do it. And as a result, the risks are not properly understood. The other people that they have to interface with are not necessarily understood. So we have to have this dialogue as a team. What are all the different stakeholders that we need to have? Sometimes at the product grooming session, we may be able to say, this user story is not ready to move forward into a sprint planning session. We can estimate this at this point because additional members have to weigh in, and it's not meeting the invest criteria, and many things. As a result, the stakeholder and the risk management have to come together as a team. It's not one person's effort. But if we start taking this tell me what I should do approach from the team, then we yield to the team members, where we are sowing the seeds of failure. Right? When that happens, what happens is they are going to come back and say, well, you didn't tell me this is required. As a result of it, I didn't do it. Then because the onus is on you. So what are we trying to say? We are basically saying like, okay, these are all the list of 10 different activities that needs to be done. And this is all the more reason why in Scrum, the Scrum Master or the product owner does not identify the tasks as much as it's done in the project management, right? As a result of that, what happens? The schedules ship. The velocities are not met. The user stories are not meeting the done criteria. If we moved it forward, the acceptance criteria is not correctly flushed out. As a result, we pass them, and then we end up with escaped defects from the customers, right? Quality compromises. So schedule slip, quality compromises, and all those things are coming up as a result of that, right? So now, when these things happen, the next immediate answer is, oh, don't worry, we are agile. We are going to fix this in the next sprint. Right? What we are really not understanding at this point is the fact that we can't relate to the cost of a sprint. If 5 people are working and each one of us is costing $1,000 for so many, for the number of hours that we are going to contribute, if $5,000 is the cost of the sprint, right? But what value did we get for this? We are not going to go to a supermarket and buy some product and say, oh, well, this product was manufactured in an agile way, so the next iteration will fix it. So let me give the full cost and buy it. Nobody buys that way, right? So we can't relate to the cost of the sprint. Why? Because we are not able to align with the business, and which is the whole problem that we are trying to solve, because we need to have the product and the product roadmap and the actual product backlog aligned to the business strategy. Then team will be able to come back and say, well, if I don't do this, this is the problem. So what's the business need as well as the business impact of non-delivery and non-compliance? When you do that, when you actually position these kind of concepts in people's mind, in the team members' mind, that's when the team is actually becoming more mature to be able to use Scrum correctly, right? So those are the things that we need to do. But if we fail to do this, we fail Scrum. And then we come back and say, Scrum failed. Scrum did not fail. We failed Scrum. Right? So how do we address that Scrum at kind of a maturity issues, right? Form cross-functional team. First of all, make sure that your team is a lot more cross-functional. I have seen a few scenarios where, we say we are doing product as a Scrum of Scrum. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. What's your one Scrum team? This is a Scrum full of developers. That's a Scrum full of testers. That's a Scrum full of analysts. Well, this is not Scrum. Right? So make sure that you are forming cross-functional team. Even do some role play exercises, like the tester is able to think like a developer. The developer is actually able to think like an architect. So those kind of things we need to actually promote within the team. Address resistance to embracing agile. Some team members may be actually resistant. It could be coming directly from the stakeholder assessment that you have done. And similar to how the stakeholder engagement assessment metrics work, find out where they are and where they should be, and try to see how you can actually promote them. But if all the things that you have done is actually not good, then at some point you have to find out when is enough, right? Train the team on all the agile practices. Frequently have some pauses so that you are able to have team be trained. How do I do better code development practices? How do I do better manual automation? How do I increase the opportunities of authoring test cases? Whatever it is, train the team on agile practices much more and more. So as the team becomes more and more mature on the Scrum processes, try to bring some additional things like how do I bring automation? How do I bring continuous integration? All those things have to come in place at this particular point, but everything has to come in small bite-sized approaches. And then avoid frequent member movements. If there is an architect that's critical to the team, making this person 50% shared resource, that person goes to some other project for 6 months. Or having this person unavailable for a long period of time or a short bursts of time. All those things are not conducive to the team. So make sure that you are avoiding all these team problem challenges, either from the team or that you could cause to the team, right? So address those things. And then finally, the tools. And this diagram I primarily picked because the tools have to have multifunctional value. It should not be just one thing alone, right? So how does it work for small tasks? How, for a larger projects and programs, the same tool should be able to scale well. And for, some other things, it should be able to scale well even more with lots of integration and all those things. So you have to start looking at how the tools serve a larger context. A lot of times people fail to understand that. As a result, they fail to understand the purpose behind the tools. The tools should promote adherence across the company. So it's not like I want to use this tool, you will use that tool, I will use this tool, then that we have way too many tools, which means the process of managing all these tools is going to be a major problem. So we are creating a problem that we are going to have a problem with, right? The tools should also reduce the cost of ownership. Every tool comes with its own, the license cost, the management cost, the upgrade cost, the security related problems and all those things. So, whenever you are having too many tools, then make sure that you are looking at the cost of the ownership of those tools. Finally, the tool should foster the collaboration. It should not be like, this tool requires so much adjustment that I'm not able to have other team members actually take part in this. So it should actually be a lot more scalable, flexible, portable, that it supports, a number of different functionality, right? When you look at this, I created an approach that I call the stage approach. Okay, I call, the ALM, the application lifecycle management tool that we really should have for product development, should have all these 5 important things. So the first one is going to be services. At the end of the day, what are my requirements? How are my requirements mapped to test cases? What is the traceability? Does it provide forward and reverse traceability? All those different things. Everything should be available there. Then the traceability between requirements as well as test cases, from defects to test cases, from defects to incidents, from creating requirements from incidents. It's a lot more than just a single directional traceability requirement, right? It needs to have a lot more robust functionality. Then auditability, who did what, when, and what decisions were made at a particular point. There needs to be a proper workflow approaches. There needs to be proper traceability to the requirements when you decided to do or not do, and all those things. Some functionality that needs to be there to capture the dialogue right there within the context of that particular artifact. Those things should be available, and it should be in such a way that you are actually able to satisfy the auditors. that the system of record shows this is the decision that was taken by so and so at a particular point and for a specific reason, and all those information are available from an audit perspective. And then governance, that should be a mechanism by which we are able to say who can make what decisions and what decisions are made by who, and all those things have to be available in the governance, and it comes from the steering committee as well as to the program committee to the project committee, and all those things that needs to be available over there too. And finally, it should be a lot more robust, that it needs to support a lot of engineering functionality like the source code control, version control, automation, manual automation, rapid authoring of test cases, and all those things. It needs to actually have part of it, right? So oftentimes what we end up doing is we pick and choose tools like, oh, for continuous integration, I will use this. For bug tracking, I will use this. For putting the artifacts, creating the artifacts of the documents, I will use this. Well, now you have multiple tools. Each tool comes with its own processes and overhead, and now you have to deal with the overhead as well. Right, dealing with all those overhead is not part of your product development protocol or expectations. Correct. So the principles that I'm talking about over here apply to any framework, whether you are using project management delivery approach or product management approach or Agile or Scrum or DSDM or XP or what TDD or whatever it is. They are all going to be applicable over there. And these are not in a sequential phases. All of them are part of one big group. And they apply to, whether it's a small organization or a bigger organization, it can apply to any one of those organizations because these principles scale well, right? But how do we end up doing selection of the tool, right? What we first start doing is primarily we don't have a strategy. We don't have a strategy for integrating teams with multiple business teams, I mean, and then break the silos. We need to foster that collaboration across the team and not just within the team, right? And so we need to have a strategy to bring the teams together, because as the teams become together, they are able to identify a lot of risks that you as a single team missed out. So you need to make sure that you are bringing the teams together and break the silos. The second one is going to be, is your product focusing on sustaining the benefits? At the end of the day, do you have a product roadmap, and do you know how your product is going to generate revenue? How you are going to sustain that once it's in production environment? So what are the best practices that you should follow? How do you mix and match different types of functionality that the user is asking against what you have to develop? Right, so the Moscow principles, the prioritization, all those things are coming into the play right over here, right? And finally, do you plan to reduce the cost of ownership by increasing the tool adoption? If different teams are having different tools, then they're going to come back and say, well, we do it this way here, we do it that way over there, and things like that. And now you are doing a lot of time translating between the requirements, between the artifacts, between the different tools, because the different teams are using them. So how are you actually bringing the teams together that actually aligns up with the integration of the teams and breaking the silos? So if there is one particular tool or a few small collection of tools that properly interface with appropriate tools in place, then everybody can be their own tool and be able to see everything that they need to see, because all the background tools will take care of it, and there is still processes involved. But it's the cost of doing business at that particular point in time. But how do we end up doing the stuff? The tool should be both technical and management user friendly. It should be allowing information that you as a technical person will be relating to, in terms of, let's say, I want to look at multiple ways of capturing requirements. It could be a user story or a use case. It could be that. Right, but it should also be a management friendly tool where I'm able to go back to a dashboard of some sort, and I'm able to see the appropriate reports generated right there, and it should give me the flexibility to customize them to some extent and things like that. Right, that's going to be your your tools selection criteria. Right. The next one is going to be, the tool should promote functionality for multiple types of role. As a developer, you may be looking at, does it support source code control and version control systems and things like that. Whereas as a tester, you may be looking at Does it allow rapid authoring and execution of tools? Does it interface with continuous integration and continuous deployment kind of a tools? You may be looking at those kind of things. As a project manager, I may be looking at earned value, does it support? Or as an agile project manager or a scrum master, I will be looking at, can I create the burn down velocity or a burn up chart? All those things, a burn up, burn down velocity, and all those things I should be able to compute very quickly across the sprint, across the releases, all those things, reasonably quickly without too much, manual time being spent, right? Those should be criteria for your tool selection. Similarly, the tool should serve both management and technical decision making. As a management person, my decision may be based upon, how do I do the proper options that I should choose from, which project I should move forward with, which project do I fund, how much fund is acceptable, those kind of things. But from a technical decision standpoint, am I able to bring two different code together and see what the contrast is, so that I'm able to do this multi-code check-in and things like that. So different people have different things, so it should allow all those things. That's how the tool selection should be governed, rather than I like this tool, I use this tool in my previous company, so that's what I'm going to use. We should move away from that mantra and should look at how the tool space is also actually evolving, right? So how do I address this Scrum tool bias preferences, right? First of all, strategize to integrate teams. First, we need to actually start looking at how do we break the silos across the business unit. Continuously adopting of this is how they operate, continuously operating the mindset of this is how we operate is not necessarily going to bridge the gap. We need to move from the me, we to us approach. The next one is select user-friendly ALM tools. When you are taking those kind of tools, find out what are all the different options that we need to have for the management, for the different artifacts, for different types of roles and different types of interfaces and all those things that we already have, so that we are able to do the best way of selecting the tools that give the best cost of ownership. Finally, train the team on the tool adoption. Regardless of how much it is, the team has to be continuously trained, because new people will come, existing people may take on different roles, and all those things are going to be constantly coming. So training should become a natural part of your evolution within the team, right? That needs to be there constantly. And we never discuss these things in in the retrospectives. And finally, when we do all these things, the cost of ownership will start slowing down, because the tool itself will not become a problem or provide a challenge through which we are missing out some important elements of the piece, and everything comes together at this particular point. Okay, so what are the Scrum for? The leadership loss and the process myopia. Those are the ones that actually contribute to the Scrum for. We want to actually go for Scrum, but we don't do this correctly. As a result, things start failing. And then scream at Scrum. Why are we screaming at Scrum? Because the team is not mature enough, and we are actually having tools that are not necessarily supporting the processes that management and technical people want. As a result, we are having this scream at Scrum approaches. So if we look at this in 4 different quadrants and start looking at how they are all tied together, and make sure that we are supporting the actual requirements, then we bring people together, we bring process together, and then Scrum will definitely succeed. Okay, if there are any questions at this point on the content, please reach out to me, Sriram@inflectra.com. If there is anything specific to the course administration, please reach out to marketing@inflectra.com, to Tia. And this is the last but one seminar in the 4th series. The last seminar is going to be on March 10th, so I recommend that you register for that. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Now I will open up for question and answers. If you have any questions, please type them up so that I'm able to look at them and respond to them. So the question here is more about a lack of a product owner. And so how can I deal with that particular thing? Again, this is a very interesting question, because I'm not sure if I'll be able to quickly answer this. This is much more involved at this point, because we need to understand the context within which this question is coming, the specific manager that you report to, or the sponsor who is actually supporting this particular initiative, we need to actually have that person understand the lack of product owner and the impact of not having a product owner on your product. So if you are able to go back and say the value that you need to generate is not getting generated because you don't have a dedicated product owner, then they will be able to listen to you. So I think we need to put some thought to this and pen it down and then go back and talk about this. Without that, we will not be able to clear-cut answer this. But that's where I would start, definitely. Thank you. And then second question is, you spoke very quickly. I'm still not clear how to get management buy-in if they don't understand and get bogged in. Again, this is something similar to what I was telling before. If the management is not buying in on the leadership or the principles behind Scrum, then we really have to have a discussion right down with them. The idea is not necessarily just using some metrics at this point, because metrics are not necessarily comparable. For instance, let's take velocity. One team may have, may deliver a velocity of, let's say, 50 points. Another team may actually deliver a velocity of 75 points. So if a management does not truly understand this team's velocity is not the same thing as that team's velocity, they're going to come back and say a point is a point. These people are actually, this team is actually able to generate 50% more velocity. So, do something and make sure that you are able to, generate. But we have to understand where this team is, where the team that delivered 50 points. Maybe the maximum they can deliver is only 50 points because of the technology challenges, because of the process that they are dealing with, because of the amount of time they are actually supporting the product as well as the the customer base. And so many factors come into play. So it's not like a clear-cut answer to say, let's focus on metrics alone. Within every single particular product, we need to come down with a specific metric that actually makes sense to them. Okay, just a few questions coming up. Okay, good. I got that one answered. I do not have any questions, but wanted to thank you for a great presentation. A lot of useful information. Thank you, Ilona. I have wasted management to get bogged down by thinking they had a lock by creating a metric carved in stone. The metrics became the blocker. Yes, you are absolutely right, Sheila. The metric becomes the blocker because you cannot use the same metric to compare against multiple teams. At the program level, we need to have different metrics. At the project level, we need to have different metrics. At each individual Scrum level, we may have to have different metrics. Velocity seems to be the primary metric that everybody goes by, but velocity should be compared against self. So if I'm a team of 5 people, and last particular sprint I delivered 50. This particular one, I can actually challenge myself to deliver, 10% more, like 55 I want to deliver. That's how I can scale. I cannot look up to some other team within the same organization and say, I need to move forward. And that will actually not necessarily be a good one for the team as well as for the organization. Good. In terms of transparency, is there a danger in having too many people have access to your PM tool? It depends. That's a very good question. It depends upon the sensitivity of your project. So sometimes I have been managing some change management initiatives, like mergers and acquisition as a result of that, some change management initiatives. At that particular point in time, some team members are going to be removed, some functionality is going to be retired, or some products are not going to be brought forward into the new organization. So when those things happen, you need to be sensitive to those kind of initiatives and not necessarily have too much transparency. But if the product is much more known within the organization, like a CRM tool, how you use a CRM tool, or how you use a benefits package within your organization, or a product that you are developing for a customer base, improvements for that, I don't think that has a major problem with this. But again, it goes back to the importance of what you are developing. And if that's very sensitive to the organization and different people within the organization, you do not want to have too much transparency. But if that's not the case, more doesn't hurt. Great questions. Yeah, just because there are a few questions that came up, I wanted to stay here. If there are any other questions, please tell me. Those of you that have typed, if I have answered your questions, please let me know. If not, please send me an email if I need to catch up with you separately. All right, looks like there are no additional questions over here. Thanks again, everyone, for all your engagement, your answers, your everything for me at this point. So if there are any questions and I haven't answered your questions too much, please email me. I will definitely be able to get back to you. Again, look forward to seeing you on the next seminar on March 10th. Have a good one.